Okay. All right. All right. Hey, there we go. All righty. I guess we'll start. Welcome to my Ordnung. First, I'll start off with saying John's getting ready to go to post-op, or pre-op, not post-op, pre-op for his surgery, so thoughts for him. A little bit about me. I'm Joe Kline. I'm Gizmo Math Boy just about everywhere, 80 to 90% guaranteed. Thanks to Vicki for recommending archive.org for my slide repo. I've had a long time interest in the history of science and technology, starting with Isaac Asimov. I mean, he wrote a lot more than just science fiction. And then in the 90s, kind of feeding that history thing, there's a show called This Old Pyramid, is a PBS little one-off thing, talked about how did they build the pyramids, because we really don't know. So they try to use methods they might have used in terms of tools and resources, and how did they do it. And I think the thing that came out of that made sense to me was they wrapped the ramp around it instead of one big ramp, because that's as big a engineering feat And that's been modified by some researchers since then, but that was cool. Also feeding my how I view science and history of science is James Burke. He did this series called Connections. When I grew up, progress was like the march of science. On one end, you had sharp sticks, on the other hand, you had plowshares. And what he basically said, well, it's a drunken walk, really. We had air conditioning in the 1840s to try and cure malaria. It didn't, so they kind of threw it away, and we didn't get air conditioning as a tool until the 1920s. So we went like 100 years between, hey, we have air conditioning, to, hey, let's use it for actually keeping us cold. And he also did a follow-up series called The Day the Universe Changed, about how an idea comes along and it just totally destroys our worldview. So, I mean, it kind of fed all that. But now to the meat of the talk. The Ordnung, what it is, this is definition. It's how the Amish and various sects of the Amish and offshoots live their lives. It's kind of derived from the German word Ordnung, of course, from rules, structure, organization. But for them, it's not a written rule. It's evolved. It's an inherent thing. They live it, so they don't. It's like your rules of your family. You don't write down the rules of family. You don't sit up straight at the dinner table. You don't, put your face in your plate. You don't have to write that down because you live it and are reminded of it as a daily part of your life. And each church and community has their own Ordnung. And most of my talk and research is based off of this book and plus my personal stuff. And that's a really good book if you want to see how the Amish evolved the rules and how it makes sense to them. This is a kitchen. Looks pretty much like any kitchen in the USA. But this is like kind of a modern Amish kitchen. And specifically, I'm talking mostly about the Lancaster Amish. There's a light above the sink that's gas, maybe battery powered. Above the stove, that's a battery powered light. Above a gas stove, doesn't violate any of their rules. You don't see, there's probably a refrigerator, but it's probably gas powered. They're just like we are, for the most part. They live kind of more the 19th century than the 20th. But them and us, we like to do the same things. Their kids like to rollerblade. Oddly enough, bikes aren't allowed for the most part, but scooters and rollerblades are. So I'm not going to go into that. But their relationship and their rules are a reflection of their relationship with their God and their community and their family. Everybody talks about electricity in the Amish. In the U.S., it wasn't until 1946 that 80% of the U.S. had electricity, so they really didn't have to worry about it. We didn't have to worry about it. Electricity's only been around in the U.S. as a de facto thing for 70 years. They really didn't have to confront the use of electricity until the 60s. The wholesalers, a lot of families in the Amish community made their living by dairy, selling milk off. The wholesalers came and said, we need to make some changes with how we do things. We need to have the milk and bulk tanks. It's okay, they had no problem with that. It has to be chilled. It's like, well, we can do that within, they had little generators that powered like 12-volt systems that cooled the milk. We need you to have to stir it automatically every 4 to 6 hours to keep the cream from separating and promoting bacterial growth. That kind of freaked them out a little bit, but they found a way to work with that, in terms of with the battery system, the way they use the electricity. And then they said, we need to pick it up on Sunday. And Amish said, hell no. That's the Sabbath. And then the wholesaler says, okay, you bent your rules for, the electricity and stuff like that. Okay, we can pick it up on either, Saturday night or Monday morning. Cool. And so they use electricity. It's evolved over time. For the most part, there's like a 12-volt rule. If it can be running 12 volts and a battery, they'll do it. They won't use public utilities. If it comes from the outside world, it doesn't count. They use high voltage electricity for welders because they need to repair their equipment, like older equipment that isn't made anymore, modern equipment. So they made an exception for that because it keeps the farmers doing what they need to do. And more recently, they've started using inverters because they need some things that need 110 volts, like computers, because spreadsheets are a hell of a drug for the Amish businesses. And they intellectually know, they call it kind of growing their own electricity. They intellectually know that going from 12 volts to 110 volts to an inverter is the same electricity, but it's a inconvenience and a willful step to create the electricity for their needs. Plus it prevents what they kind of call the cascade effect. Oh, I got this 110 volt power, now I can have TVs and DVDs and all this other crap. So they kind of work within that framework. It's, like I said, it makes no sense from the outside, but in terms of how they evolved it, it makes sense. Guess what this is? Telephone. The Amish, it's called like a telephone shanty or something like that. The Amish call phones half conversations because a big part of their life is socializing. People drop in and talk. And in phones, you don't hear the nonverbal communications part. They don't like that. So they said they kind of outlawed phones. Not really outlawed them, they said, okay, if you're going to use a phone, it has to be a willful act. It has to be separate from the house. The Amish, like the rest of us, they find ways to kind of bend the rules a little bit. Like Amish business, his desk's here. There's a window to an outside room building to the phone. He just kind of reaches through and gets the phone and asks, you know. So it's a deliberate act to use this technology. It doesn't interrupt their flow of life. Okay, now let's talk about how my earn. But let's talk about me and what makes me. Hi, my name's Joe. I'm a tech hoarder. I like technology. I get lots of tech. I like Linux. I'm a zealot about it, but not so pure that RMS would keep me in his church. But I'm kind of agnostic about it for the most part, but I'm a Linux zealot. Sure, Windows is evil, but it's not like a MetaMax user. Those guys' brains are just wired differently than us. But it's not like their brains are broken. I think Perl's the best language ever. That being said, that's kind of where I'm coming from. This is kind of where I got at the start of, I didn't call it my organ at the time, but it's a quote from Socrates. The unexamined life is not worth living. That's brutal. It's like, throw your life away if you're not looking at it. But I think it's a good starting point. Look at your life. What are you doing? Why are you doing it? Especially nowadays with the quantified self movement, we have a really good way to examine our lives in amazing ways. It's also informed by Douglas Shishkoff and specifically his book, Program or Be Programmed, 10 Commandments for the Digital Age. These are the 10, just show up there for you to look at. But there's only the first two that kind of relate to this talk in my Ordnung. Don't always be on. You don't have to be connected to everything all the time. You can close the browser window, you can put the phone away, the computer away, and just not be connected. And be live in person. When you're with somebody, be with them. Being with people is the highest bandwidth form of communication we have. We cannot get fast communication between two people standing on a whiteboard exchanging information. We do have ways around it. I mean, video chat kind of gets us kind of be next to each other, but when you're with somebody, be with them. A lot of times when you're with me, I'll have my phone, of course, with me, and you'll see me put it down, face down. That serves two purposes. Protect the screen, because I don't want to get cracked, but also makes it harder for me to see my communication, things that are happening to me. Another thing happened making this talk. My wife said, you spend a lot of time on Twitter. It's like, for a guy that self-examines his life, that's kind of a flaw, don't you think? And she's right. I mean, it's nice to have someone on the outside, hey, you're doing something weird. But this is my phone's home screen. This is how I spend my digital life on my phone. Everything that's on the lower right-hand corner is within easy reach of my thumb because, I mean, this is a huge phone. So, and we have an interesting relationship with technology. It changes over time. Day-to-day uses, things change, our preferences change, how we consume things change. But also sometimes the convenience and utility of the tools we use aren't always there. Something that just is with you all the time you'll use more, even though it's not the best. So sometimes good enough and being with you is good. And if I had to be tied down to say, what's part of your ordering? These are 4 parts. It kind of talks about utility. Perfect is the enemy of the good. I don't need a perfect solution. I don't need the greatest, shiniest, newest technology. Stop and think about why you want the tech. Why do I want the new phone? Why do I want the new S6? Why do I want the iPhone 6? Why do I need it? Also, how does it fit in your life? Do I need the shiniest phone? I mostly use my phone to do Twitter and a calendar and talking with my wife. Do you really need it? Do I really need the greatest, shiniest, neatest phone? No. Do I need the greatest, shiniest laptop? No. I find ways to adapt. In my professional life, I've always been kind of a supporter. I've never been the person that made the cool new idea or was a software architect. I always kind of came along afterwards and supported that infrastructure or that person in making tools, kind of making sure things were working. And so over and over, I became agnostic about technology. I made sure that what the people needed to do their job is, whatever their environment they're using, whatever operating system they're using, whatever application they're using, can they do their job effectively and efficiently with that technology, regardless of my biases? I may like Linux a lot, but if the application's only in Windows, we gotta have Windows. Open source communities have an Ordnung. All organizations have an Ordnung. Sometimes it's formal, sometimes it's not. You decide what version control system you're using. How do you accept commits? What features and kind of features you commit. And here's a couple examples in the Perl community I'll show. Modulicious wants to be on the bleeding edge of web frameworks and technology. Backwards compatibility is not in their missions, so to speak. But because of that, they have a really good deprecation policy. They're going to tell you what's going to break in the next version, which is good. Perl in 5.18, not sure you can see it too much, they introduce a process of how do we deal with features. New features get tagged as experimental, and when they become accepted, the tag goes away and you never get the flag. And if it doesn't become accepted for some period of time, it goes away. As of yet, since the 5.18 Delta, there hasn't been a feature that's kind of done this, so it's still kind of amorphous. But we have a process to how we deal with new features. We do all of this, I do all of this, to try and not be letting technology isolate me. It can be very isolating. It can also be very empowering. We can be trapped by our cell phones. This is a mural by a local artist called Zach Medler. And he did a series of, talking about information technology, get a shout out to him and then the people that made that art. The Amish have their Ordnung to preserve social capital, to preserve their interactions. They make bargains with the world constantly. They don't want the world to intrude on them and how they live. But when they do make those bargains, they have guiding principles that help them with that. And like I said, I mean, they fork. If they think the rules aren't good, they'll up and move and go. So examine your life, act on that, find a relationship with technology that works with your communities, your family, your friends, and I hope it's a balanced one. Thank you. Any questions?
Can you rewind to the 10th slide, or 10 principles?
No? Hold on. Yes, I have a URL here. And to go to the 10 Commandments. There it is. So, it's a good book. I mean, for the most part, I mean, you didn't.
Actually, just looking for the name of the book.
Oh, it's a Program or Be Programmed is the name of the book. So, any other questions? I'll just talk about that then. Oh, that's all right.
Just put it in your synopsis on the.
Yeah, actually, it'll be on the abstract, so later. I haven't updated that before the class. What's interesting about the Rushkoff book, he talks about, it kind of comes later in terms of if you don't understand technology, and you don't actually have to be a programmer and have programmability, you'll be controlled by others that do. You know, kind of like and a later example he didn't talk about is if you have an automatic car that has a problem and you go Google, okay, where's it got a mechanic, then look at it. If you don't understand that Google searches are manipulated by people, you don't maybe not know that the top-rated mechanic may not be the best mechanic for you. So, as an aside. Any other questions? Yes? No? Maybe? Yes?
Sorry for this, but does San Dimas High School football rule?
Yes, it does. Thank you much. Socrates. I thought Trog would do that, but you know, hey. I wanted you to do it. So, all right, if there are no further questions, have a good conference for what's left of it, and thank you very much.